Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, Vanderbilt law professor Brian Fitzpatrick. We're talking about the Supreme Court. For the Republicans to be able to confirm whoever the nominee from the president is, they have to get all 51 of their members to vote yes. How difficult is that going to be? There's been some problems with this particular White House getting things through on major issues like Obamacare, for example.
I think it's tricky because John McCain is sick, and so he's not going to be there.
He may not be there at all, whether he wants to vote for or against.
I think that's right, and so I think it's basically a 50 to 49 majority, which means they have to get everyone, because if they lose one, they've only got 49.
But if they only get 50 votes in a parliamentary situation, let's just say a Republican changes their mind and abstains, and that could be like McCain. If it goes 50 to 49, it fails, because the only way the vice president votes is if it's a tie. It has to be a 50-50 tie before he votes.
I think 50-49 still wins.
No, you have to get 51 votes. You have to get a majority. Yes, I believe you do.
Oh, that's news to me.
So well, you might want to look at that. What about Susan Collins?
Well, that's going to be a big problem then, because I don't think McCain is going to vote. Because I think he's too ill.
What about Susan Collins of Maine, or what about Lisa Murkowski of of Alaska? They both voted against the health care bill and stopped at least the first couple of efforts to make changes about that. They may be under particular pressure if the nominee put out has a real anti-abortion rights record.
I think
a lot of women's groups on.
I think that's the Achilles heel for Trump right now, are those two senators. And I'm very confident that whoever he nominates will have been vetted with those two senators before that person is nominated. He's not going to nominate someone that they can't support. So they have a lot of power right now.
Two other senators that have been at odds with this president from time to time: Jeff Flake from Arizona, he's retiring. So is Bob Corker of Tennessee. Where do they go? Are they they've been not afraid to basically speak truth to power in this situation, or vote against the president, or at least threaten to?
I don't see them as a problem at all, because the truth be told, everyone on President Trump's list is an incredibly well accomplished and well thought of jurist. And so I think they're going to be pleased with any potential nominee. The two senators that could be a problem are the two women that you mentioned. The
Democrats are pushing to try to make this at least after the November election, if not into the new Senate. But if they go into the new Senate, most people seem to think that the majority the Republicans have in the Senate might actually be larger in the next Senate than this. So aren't the Democrats arguing against themselves in some ways by pushing it into next year?
Very good question. You know, I think that a lot of people thought this was supposed to be a year the Republicans picked up seats, like you indicated. Then there has been a time where people thought the Republicans could lose the majority. I'm not exactly sure where we are with the current prognostications, but I think you raise a very good point. Be careful what you wish for. It could get worse for the Democrats, not better.
Mitch McConnell, the leader in the Senate for the Republicans, 2 years ago blocked President Obama's efforts to nominate Merrick Garland to what was the empty seat for Justice Scalia when he died. He said that the voters need to have a say in this. Did he just mean presidential elections?
Well, apparently.
Because obviously this was even closer to what it was when Justice Scalia died.
Apparently, you know, there have been a number of times when we have had Supreme Court confirmations during midterm elections. It's much less common that it happens during presidential elections, but just for the record, I think it was wrong what the Republicans did to Merrick Garland. He should have had a vote, and I think it was really wrong. And I'm not sure we want to make two wrongs into a right here by delaying it again.
The history of this is that in the past there have been lots of nominations that have happened fairly close to elections, whether it's been both presidential elections or midterm elections. It seems to be kind of an odd, or at least a new way to look at this particular process, and one that might be hard to work since we have elections every 2 years.
2 years.
So you'd be close to election almost any time you have something.
I totally agree with you. We should not continue this precedent to the extent that we started with Merrick Garland. It was a mistake.
Given all the political intrigue and machinations we've been talking about at the beginning of this, from the beginning of the show, do you think the founding fathers envisioned anything like this when they put together this part of the Constitution? I mean, all this stuff going on, they didn't see the Supreme Court as being this kind of a political lightning rod, did they?
No, and you know, there's a couple of reasons for that.
It took John Marshall to do that, didn't it?
You know, number one, they had a very different view of law interpretation back then than we do. They thought that a lot of law interpretation was self-evident. There wasn't a lot of discretion on the part of the judges, whereas now we understand that the law is not clear a lot of times and the judges are going to have a lot of discretion. And so when you have people with a lot of discretion making law, then democracy tends to care a little bit more about what they do. But things did really not take off with Supreme Court confirmation process until the hearings were televised. That's really when everything started to become much more interesting for the democratic process.
There's been talk in recent years about having a constitutional amendment that would have justices on the court served by a set term rather than a life appointment. What is your thought about that?
Totally supportive of that. I think that's a great idea. You know, when the founding generation put life tenure into the Constitution, we lived, what, until age 50? Now we're living till 80, 90. You can be on the court for 40 years. That's way too much power for one person. We ought to go to a long 18, 20-year term.
But having reappointments for these people, I assume they would be, aren't we further politicizing the process because we'd have a Supreme Court nomination coming before the Senate almost every couple of years, and this is already a contentious process. If we're having all 9 of them come in from time to time, man, that sounds like a real problem.
It'd be a less contentious process. Here's why. The best proposal I've seen gives each justice an 18-year term, just one term, and it's staggered every 2 years. Every president would know every 2 years I get a new nomination, and therefore that stresses the whole process. Right now, the reason why it's so high profile is because the person you could be putting on could be there for 40 years and you don't know when you get another one. But if you had it regularized every 2 years, it totally diffuses the situation.
It's going to be an interesting couple of months, isn't it?
I think so.
Thank you so much, Professor.
My pleasure.
Fitzpatrick, thank you for being with us, and we'll probably have you back to talk about this later because I have a feeling this is far from over.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics. Hoping back here again for a future show. If you can't get up politics in the meantime, go to the NewsChannel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.